Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and welcome to episode 163 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. The FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report is sponsored by Advanced Compliance Solutions. Today we have a special Friday episode where Mike Brown, the Managing Director at Infotel Inc., and I visit about the FIFA indictments. We talk about the individuals who were caught up in the arrests Wednesday when the indictments were unsealed, possible FCPA implications, and we take a look at some of the sponsors and their responses and how they might be impacted going forward. I hope you enjoy the episode, and as always, please send in any questions you might have. You can either email them to me or others, or place them as comments to this blog post for my upcoming mailbag episode. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and welcome to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. While not an emergency podcast, it's certainly one that came up on short notice because I'm back with my good friend and colleague Mike Brown, and we're here to talk about the FIFA indictments, which were unsealed on Wednesday. Mike, we both happen to be in Oregon today, so good Oregon morning to you.
Good morning to you, Tom. Thanks for having me, and let's talk about FIFA and all the different issues.
Okay. Well, I thought what I might do, Mike, is maybe lay a little bit of groundwork with some of the legal issues, criminal charges from the indictment. First of all, most, I think 13 out of 14 of those indicted are not in the United States. So that, of course, begs the question of how they got jurisdiction over these folks. The short and easy answer is the following. The criminal conspiracy alleged is under RICO. And under RICO, once a criminal enterprise is established, any knowing participant in that criminal enterprise anywhere in the world is equally guilty and or liable under RICO. So we had a series of allegations of meetings in the United States, wire transfers to U.S. banks, telephone calls in the United States, emails housed on U.S. servers. So we have an original U.S. jurisdiction, or a nexus, I should say, at some point, and that allowed the Department of Justice to bring the RICO action. In addition to the RICO action, there are allegations of bribery and corruption and of tax evasion. Now, we should note that the bribery and corruption is not brought under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. There is no allegations that companies violated the FCPA by paying bribes to FIFA officials. Rather, these were all claims that FIFA officials had received bribes. There's also money laundering claims as well. So a very interesting set of legal theories brought by the Department of Justice, which allowed them to arrest or have arrested through the auspices of various international police and law enforcement agencies, FIFA officials from across the globe. So, for instance, we had Dawn Raid in Switzerland, where FIFA's annual meeting is going on. In fact, we're hoping to get word of whether Sepp Blatter will be reelected today, and we may be able to give breaking news on this podcast. But we also had an arrest of Jack Warner in Trinidad and others. We had one U.S. person, Chuck Blazer, former number 2 at CONCACAF, arrested. And actually he was a cooperating witness and pled guilty to numerous charges against him. But the key was he cooperated with the Department of Justice, wore a wire in the meetings, so they have a cooperating witness, undercover operation, wiretaps. Don't know about phone or video taps, but clearly lots of information in front of the Department of Justice. The reaction across the globe has been quite interesting, I thought. Right. It ranged from Vladimir Putin, who heavily criticized the action, to folks in the country of Trinidad who I might have thought were a little concerned about U.S. big bullyism or overreach in this legal action, yet were frankly pleased that someone as allegedly corrupt as Warner was finally being brought to justice. Right. We should also note that all of the individuals outside the United States have to be extradited to the United States. So that's a legal proceeding the Department of Justice will have to go through outside of the U.S., so that could present other hurdles as well. Nevertheless, within the corruption world or an anti-corruption world across the globe, Mike, I think you could say this was the about as big a stunning development as one could have. What are you seeing, hearing, feeling, or thinking about all this?
Well, what's stunning for me is just the length and depth of the cooperation amongst the governing bodies. I mean, the wiretap and undercover work has been going on since 2011. Okay, so we have 4 years of undercover work that's going to come to light. And while people got excited about Wednesday and having to do a fast reaction, this is by no means the end of the game. Is my first thought, right? And I see them trying to flip and get easy prosecution, easy guilt issues, so that they can then continue going up the chain and going across the chains into different organizations to discover basically this kind of corrupt behavior. And I think more heads are going to roll, so to speak, in the future. And I think this is just the start. And this is a perfect storm. I mean, what perfect storm for FIFA? One is that their reputation is completely tarnished, even with all of the changes in their governing body constructions, how they tried to redesign themselves, to all of the people who actually have given money to FIFA for advertisement, for example. I can't imagine a worse reputational situation at this point in time for Nike, Adidas, all the other people that have actually supported FIFA throughout the years. They will be investigated, or at least their reputation will be tarnished. So that's my thought is, what are they doing to mitigate the problems? And I hope like heck they have years of well audited, well constructed compliance programs. But we'll see probably here in the next 3 to 6 months, more things are going to come down. That's my guess.
Well, I would have to say that's probably a pretty prescient guess, because the Loretta Lynch, who actually the U.S. Attorney General who announced the charges, specifically stated that the investigation was ongoing.
Right.
The other thing that I think was at least, if not stunning, certainly caught my eye, was you had the Attorney General and the head of the FBI at the press conference.
Right.
And I've talked to several people, and really none of us could recall a time where we saw the nation's 2 top law enforcement officials at a press conference announcing criminal charges being brought. And I think that really speaks to the not only seriousness and resolve of the U.S. government, but also the worldwide scope and impact of these charges. Because the allegations and nefarious nature of FIFA have been known, speculated, thought about, talked about for a long time, and no one's really done anything. We had the Garcia report, which looked at the allegations of bribery and corruption around the awarding of the 2018 World Cup to Russia and the 2022 World Cup to Qatar. That report was shelved by FIFA. They apparently didn't take any action. They released a redacted report, and the entire episode was so dirty, smelly, and otherwise oily that the author of the report had to resign from FIFA and distance himself from their own reactions to his report for them. Right. So my guess, or I would suspect that report will become public now due to this. But you brought up several really good issues, but I would even say important issues that any company who has been a sponsor of FIFA, currently is a sponsor of FIFA, or is considering it, needs to start to think about. So if maybe we could break those down a little bit, let's start with reputational issues. Right. And, I'm a lawyer, so sometimes I don't think as much about reputational issues as civilians do. Sure. But for many of the world's largest corporations, and we can just, name several of them, Coca-Cola, Visa, Nike, many large U.S. multinational corporations advertise through marketing, either sponsorships, partnerships, or others with FIFA.
Right.
How would if you were talking to one of them about reputational damage, what might be some of the things you'd be raising in those meetings today, Mike?
Oh, well, first off, they better have a PR response team put together for reputation for the reputational part. So have they put together a team? Is the team structured? I wouldn't worry too much yet about how you want to respond to the issues, but I would make sure that you actually have a plan. And you can't get away from the concept of I'm doing this to sell product. So you have to ask yourself, is my reputation going to be tarnished so badly that I can't sell product because of the exposure? So you have to look at that first. And it's a big stage. And FIFA, in many ways, has the World Cup every 4 years, but they have pretty much events going on year over year throughout the individual different regions. So there is really good exposure. I think it's one of the reasons why probably Nike has done well in the soccer world because of that. But from a reputational perspective, I would be asking every regional leader in my company, if we are associated with FIFA, is that going to affect our sales, our reputation, all that aspect of it, and then get alignment. And if you drive alignment towards yes, it's going to affect it, then you have to actually put together a strategy by how to go about mitigating it. So in this case, there's numerous ways of mitigating reputational issues, but face-to-face, head-on, aggressive, kind of communication is probably the thing that actually has to happen. And you ultimately have to separate, right? So you have to separate. We aren't FIFA. We didn't participate in that bad behavior. Our product is fantastic. Unfortunately, we're associated with them because we advertised. And I think people tend to be kind of practical. Now, what has to actually happen is they have to basically know deep down through an investigation that they actually weren't practicing corrupt behavior, because as soon as they put their chin out to say that we didn't practice corrupt behavior, there could be someone proving them that they did. So that's the thing that you actually would have to make sure that what you state is going to be correct, and keep yourself distanced from the organization. So that's my first thought.
Well, Mike, unfortunately, we had one company identified by contract in the indictment, and it was a company which paid $160 million for a 10-year sponsorship to deliver shoes to the Brazilian soccer team.
Yep.
And not only here in Oregon, but across the United States, I think many of us could guess who that is, since there is a U.S. company that is sponsoring these shoes for the Brazilian soccer team. And unfortunately, that company is Nike.
Right.
So that sort of brings us to what practical steps that Nike may be engaging in now. And, of course, from my perspective of the document, is there an audit trail?
Right.
What due diligence have they done? All of those things. If you were asked or those questions by a company today, what would you be at least raising with them as issues to investigate now?
Oh, my gosh. First off, I would absolutely be gathering all the internal questionnaires that they would be having asked for any of the third parties. And what I'm talking about is the third party internal questionnaires. Why are you using this company? And make sure that you have an audit trail and a successfully filled out information on the internal questionnaires, okay? Because the internal questionnaires are going to then lead to the external questionnaires of what's the behavior from the third parties that you're actually be working with. And make sure that at that point in time you have filled out, audited documented third-party questionnaires at an absolute minimum, okay? And then if you have decisions that you've made from a risk factor that have established, who do you need to actually go deeper with, be able to have that communicated, revisit those deeper due diligence cases, and then frankly, I would seriously think about reinitiating in the riskiest regions, riskiest areas, investigations. If it's in Brazil, we've got a lot of amazing examples that are happening in that country right now that would scare me quite dramatically about prosecutional types of things if corruption actually is occurring. So, what are your thoughts on that, Tom?
Well, I certainly agree with your analysis that it's time to go back and see what documentation you have in place and take a look at what you have going forward. But I might also suggest that because the FCPA itself is not implicated, because FIFA, although a NGO or non-governmental organization, is not on the list specified as being covered by the FCPA, doesn't end your inquiry. And that inquiry could go a couple of different ways. One is many of the individuals involved in the indictments are members of their national soccer federations.
Right.
And although here in the United States that's not a part of the U.S. government, in many countries it is a state-owned enterprise or formally a part of the government for their own political reasons. So it may be that if you have paid bribes to someone who is on the board of FIFA, yet also on a national soccer federation, that person may be a government official under another definition of the Act. So you need to go back and look at, I would say, do additional due diligence on the individuals to see if they are politically exposed persons in any way, whether they're former government officials. I really, and I don't mean a level 1 or level 2, I mean a deep dive, boots on the ground. You better call Mike Brown at Infotel today and get out there and really seriously investigate all of the people that you have been your primary contacts on any marketing efforts, in addition to those persons who were indicted. But the other thing is, and the other possible avenue for exposure for U.S. companies is one that is not normally used or thought of, but it has been brought to bear a few times, and that's something called the Travel Act. Okay. The Travel Act makes a federal crime out of a state law which would bar bribery or corruption. So, for instance, in California, there is a law which prevents ordinary private-to-private commercial bribery where the bribe amount is over $1,000. Right. So below $1,000, you can pay a bribe in California and you're not subject to any sort of civil or criminal liability, or at least criminal liability. Above $1,000, you are. And the U.S. government, through the Travel Act, that conduct is illegal and becomes a federal crime. So Nike headquartered in Oregon, Coca-Cola headquartered in Atlanta, that would all be subject to the state, their state laws. And in fact, I'm not aware of any Texas headquartered corporations who might be involved, but in Texas, the law is any benefit paid. Oh, wow. So there's no dollar amount for commercial bribery. So it can be quite severe if prosecuted to the full extent. So there is a possible avenue to get to FCPA liability, even if the person who the bribe was paid to is only a member of FIFA and not a government official in any other way. So you need to really get in and do a deep level dive on who are the people you're dealing with, who are your contact people, not just who are your agents, but who's sitting across the table from you, who received any benefits. And goes all the way doon to meals, entertainment, you name it.
Well, it's the audit trail for me that, you follow the money. So if any of these companies that have, how did they earn the broadcasting rights? And if they have a a tremendously long, well-documented audit trail of what they did and who they did their work with, I think that would start to give them more comfort, right? But
right.
But I completely agree with you on the deeper dive on who they are actually dealing with, because I personally would treat it as an FCPA issue, even though legally I know it's not. I would have crossed that barrier into an FCPA behavior. So,
like we talked about potential reputational damage,
right.
we talked about steps that a company might take in a sort of a retrospective application to look back to see what exposure it may or may not have. What steps might you suggest a company take with FIFA going forward? And would they be any different than kind of what you detailed under the look back perspective?
Well, I honestly think that I would not be using. I would not advertise and spend a penny with FIFA until FIFA actually changed a few things. And I think FIFA has the ability to change their construction, how they're organized. They aren't transparent as much as they want to say that they are. They're not. So I also think this is fairly actually indicative and similar to things like the NFL, things like the IOC, things like the FIFA organizations. Is that I think their organizational structure actually needs to become much more transparent before I begin to look at advertising. I think some of the ways that you can do that, I literally would step away until they have a commitment. And it's one of the reasons why I don't think SEF should actually be reinstituted into this area. And it's on two areas. I'm saying this. One is that if there's corruption involved, then of course he shouldn't be involved if he's directly associated with corruption. But probably the bigger issue is incompetence. Okay, because if he actually has allowed this to occur and hasn't nipped this in the bud as a leader from the top, then to me he is shouldn't have earned the right to actually lead the organization. So structural changes and actually changes at the top, I think, are pretty critical for me at FIFA before I would actually re-engage with FIFA in any kind of advertisement sort of process. So.
Well, Mike, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time. About the only thing I could say is watch this space, because I think it's going to get hot, hairy, ugly, and at the end of the day, going to provide a lot of lessons learned for the compliance practitioner. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, either to do that deep dive, retrospective look back, or find out about any of the services that Infratel offers, or talk to you about some of your comments today, how would they do so?
Well, they can call me directly at 541-231-3871, or they can actually go to our website at www.infortal, it's INFORTAL.com, and make a connection and call the office, or call Candace or I, or anyone in the office, and we'd love to work with them.
Well, Mike, thanks a lot, and I'm sure we'll be continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Tom. Take care, and enjoy your Oregon weather.
All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.